Welcome back. We start with the US, which has expressed concerns over the implications of India's controversial citizenship bill. The US envoy for religious freedom, Sam Brownback, says New Delhi should abide by its commitment to protect minorities' rights. Brownback's statement comes days before next week's ministerial meeting between India and the US. Meanwhile, violent protests against the bill have spread to West Bengal and Uttar Pradesh. Kolkata witnessed demonstrations at several places, bringing traffic to a standstill. Mass protest rallies were carried out in Howrah, Murshidabad, Birbhum, parts of Burdwan and North Bengal. The agitators are rallying against the controversial act which gives citizenship to minorities except Muslims. Earlier, the UN's Human Rights Office also condemned India's Citizenship Act. It said the act is discriminatory in nature as it does not extend protection to Muslims. The US and the United Kingdom have issued travel advisories asking their citizens to avoid visiting the northeastern states of India. The advisories have been issued in the wake of recent violent protests over the controversial citizenship law. The two governments have temporarily suspended official travels to Assam and Tripoli states, where demonstrations have turned fierce. The law stands to give citizenship to non-Muslim minorities from 3 neighboring countries. Indian opposition leaders have termed the act unconstitutional and discriminatory against Muslims. The US has warned Iran of a decisive response if its personnel or partners are harmed in Iraq. In a statement, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Tehran of firing rockets at a military base housing US troops near Baghdad airport this week. Pompeo said Iran must respect the sovereignty of its neighbors. He said Tehran must immediately stop providing aid and support to third parties in Iraq and beyond. Turning to Lebanon, Pompeo said the US will continue to support the Lebanese people in their fight against government corruption and terrorism. Earlier, the US Treasury Department imposed new sanctions against 2 alleged Hezbollah money launderers and financiers. In a phone call, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has informed Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about the human rights situation in occupied Kashmir. The Prime Minister called for immediate removal of restrictions in the valley. He underlined the need to peaceful resolution of the Kashmir dispute to diffuse tensions in the region. Occupied Kashmir has been under a curfew and communications blackout since India stripped the region of its autonomy on the 5th of August. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has left for Saudi Arabia on a one-day visit. The Foreign Office said the Premier will discuss bilateral relations and regional developments with the Saudi leadership. It said the visit is part of regular exchanges between the leadership of both countries. This is Prime Minister Imran Khan's 4th visit to Saudi Arabia this year. Following a one-day trip to Iran in October, Khan visited the kingdom as part of his initiative for peace and security in the region. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah says the next government must bring all sides together to tackle the country's worst economic crisis. In a televised speech, Nasrallah said the supporters the Free Patriotic Movement taking part in the cabinet. Nasrallah said he hopes a new prime minister will be named on Monday, but he said forming a new cabinet will not be easy. The US says it will be tested soon on bringing North Korea back to the negotiating table to discuss its nuclear weapons program. Speaking at a conference in New York, US Defense Secretary Mark Esper said Washington is trying hard to resume the talks. Esper said the threat of Pyongyang's nuclear and missile programs can only be resolved through a diplomatic agreement. He warned that a war on the Korean Peninsula would be horrible. Tensions between the sides have renewed in recent weeks. North Korea has ramped up pressure on the US to come up with a solution to the stalled negotiations before the end of the year. Hundreds of people have taken the streets of London to protest against Britain's election results. The demonstrators chanted, "Boris Johnson is not my Prime Minister." Opposition supporters blocked the traffic in London a day after the Conservatives won the poll. The demonstrations drew a heavy police presence in the capital. Protesters demanded amendments to the UK's refugee policy. The Conservative Party have won a majority with 365 seats. The Labour Party could only manage 203, while the Scottish National Party won 48 seats. Turkey's foreign ministry summoned the US ambassador to Ankara over a resolution passed by US lawmakers. The motion recognizes the killings of Armenians during the First World War as genocide. The foreign ministry said Turkey's dismay has been conveyed to the US envoy. Ankara has condemned the move, accusing US lawmakers of politicizing history. The foreign ministry has declared the vote null and void. The UN has renewed the mandate for the agency supporting Palestinian refugees for another 3 years. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency has faced budgetary difficulties since the US ended its $360 million per year in aid. The agency mandate has been extended until the year 2023. It received 169 votes in its favor and 9 abstentions, while the US and Israel voted against. Both Washington and Tel Aviv have accused it of mismanagement and anti-Israeli incitement. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas praised the vote as a victory for international law and the rights of the Palestinian refugees. In Libya, Prime Minister Faiz al-Sarraj says Eastern Commander Khalifa Haftar's forces have not advanced towards Tripoli. His statement came a day after Haftar ordered his forces to advance towards Tripoli for a final battle for the capital. More in this report.
Libya has been in turmoil since the civil war in 2011 toppled longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi. He was later killed by the rebels. In the chaos that followed, the country was divided with a weak UN-supported administration in Tripoli and a rival government in the east aligned with Khalifa Haftar. Responding to the recent warning by Khalifa Haftar, Libya's Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj dismissed the threats as lies. He said talks are scheduled between both parties in mid-April to end the conflict.
We were on the verge of meeting for talks together in mid-April in Ghadames to discuss a future that unifies us and about dreams that we all share of a nation filled with peace, stability, safety and security. This is our message.
In April, Khalifa Haftar's forces launched an offensive to capture Tripoli. According to United Nations, at least 200 civilians and more than 2,000 fighters have been killed since then. The fighting has also displaced some 146,000 people.
Meanwhile, the United Nations has warned that around 900,000 people in Libya will need humanitarian assistance next year. UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said $115 billion will be required for aid. UN body said internally displaced persons, non-displaced, conflict-affected people and refugees are the most vulnerable people in Libya's crisis. Clean drinking water, medical services and safe housing have been affected in the country, particularly for women and children. UN Office said refugees and migrants continue to be exposed to human rights violations, exploitation and abuse. Libya has been battered by escalating violence, unrest and political instability since the fall of former leader Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. The United Nations says Chile's police and army have committed serious human rights violations to quell recent mass protests. In a report, the UN Human Rights Office said the violations should be prosecuted. UN Mission Chief Aima Guerres Delgado said the police used excessive and unnecessary force in response to the demonstrations. Delgado said more than 1,600 protesters remain in detention. Earlier, Chile's lower house rejected a move to impeach President Sebastián Piñera. He was accused of failing to safeguard human rights during weeks of rioting. 26 people have been killed since protests over a rise in metro fares began in October and quickly spiraled out of control. In Nigeria, 14 soldiers and a police officer have been killed in a militant attack on the northeastern village of Mamuri. The military said militants stormed a security post in the village with more than a dozen pickup trucks fitted with machine guns. It said the military ran out of ammunition, which gave the insurgents the upper hand in the battle. In a statement, ISWAP, a militant group that broke away from Boko Haram in 2016, claimed the attack. Meanwhile, an ISIS-backed militant group has executed 4 people kidnapped at the town of Damasak in northeastern state of Borno. The global aid agency Action Against Hunger said the victims were among 6 hostages abducted 5 months ago. The humanitarian agency said the armed group claimed to have killed 4 hostages. One of the victims was murdered in September. The organization has condemned the killings and called for the immediate release of its last member of staff. We're taking a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Germany, 1 person has been killed and 25 others wounded in an explosion at an apartment in the central town of Blankenberg. Police say the explosion might have been caused by exploding gas canisters. Residents from nearby buildings have been evacuated. Police say bomb disposal squads have reached the spot and a rescue operation is underway. In the US, lovers of an unusual can take a look at the country's largest ice maze to be found in the center of Washington, D.C. The huge labyrinth is made of pure clear ice. See more of the winter wonderland in this report.
Washington, D.C.'s city center is the place to find an ice-cold thrill for the eyes, the largest ice maze in the United States. It's an immersive exhibit built with 7-foot-high ice walls made of nearly 57,000 kilos of crystal clear frozen water. The 300 ice blocks are lit up with bright lights to complete the sense of being lost in a frozen labyrinth.
It was kind of cold, kind of warm in there. For a cold day, it's good to be inside. And it was pretty much easy for us, but we got some dead ends, but we made it through.
Though the winter weather forecast predicts 2 days of rain, organizers say the maze, which is under a tent, can withstand all kinds of weather, except perhaps a tornado.
No, me neither. It's totally unique. I think it's really cool. DC has been putting new things like the botanical garden. I think that's something new. I haven't seen it before. And then now the ice maze. I think it's really cool that there's more things to do in the city. Yeah.
Visiting the maze is free, although guests can donate to the Children's National Hospital through the Find Your Joy campaign. It will remain open to the public until tomorrow.
US President Donald Trump has cancelled new tariffs on China after both countries reached a Phase 1 trade deal. The tariffs were due to take effect on Sunday. President Trump said existing tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese imports will stay in place pending further talks on a second phase deal. He said Washington will open the second phase talks immediately rather than wait until after the US presidential elections. China's finance minister said Beijing will cancel retaliatory tariffs on the US. He said China will buy $50 billion worth of US agricultural products. The Chinese official said the next step is for both sides to go through legal steps and set a time to sign the deal. Norway is one of the only few countries in Europe with higher greenhouse gas emissions now than in 1990. As the world tries to slow global warming, a huge oil field is breathing new life into Norway's oil sector. More about dollars beneath the sea in this report.
Beneath these North Sea platforms lie dozens of billions of dollars worth of oil. The Johan Sverdrup field, run by Norwegian producer Equinor, pumps around 350,000 barrels of oil per day. Already the highest producing oil field in Western Europe, the company aims to almost double its daily production by 2023. While alarm over climate change and calls to curb fossil fuel production are mounting, this field guarantees the Nordic nation at least another 5 decades of oil production.
Based on our own assessment, also listening to the IEA, the International Energy Agency, there will be need for hydrocarbons also in 2050. There will be less need.
Across 4 platforms, hundreds of people work to control the drilling and pumping. In a control room, monitors watch the production carefully. All activities on the field are powered by an undersea cable from Norway, sourced from clean hydropower.
Every barrel produced from Johan Sverdrup is 25 times lower carbon footprint compared to the global average. And that's important in a climate perspective.
While Norway backs green initiatives like subsidising electric cars and protecting rainforests, the government is allocating record numbers of oil and gas exploration permits, meaning the days of the oil industry and Johan Sverdrup far from over.
This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.